This is going to be a fiery one, folks. I'm just going to say it right there. If you have your popcorn, get it out, sit down, and get excited because I have the one and only Meghan Stevenson in the house. Meghan, welcome to the show.
Jake, thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, the reason I say this is going to be a fiery one is because I come from a background that has no education around books. I didn't work for a publishing house. I don't ghostwrite. I've written books and it's changed my life. And that's what's been amazing for me. But our guest today, Meghan, comes from the traditional publishing world. She is an entrepreneur, an educator, a ghostwriter, a book editor, and we're going to get into the real truth of the publishing industry. So, Meghan, to kick things off here, talk to us a little bit about your expertise, your experience, and kind of where you come from in the world of books.
Sure. So I started my career in 2004 as an intern for Simon and Schuster, which was then and is now the number 2 or number 3 publisher in the United States. So I worked at Simon and Schuster. I got taught basically how to be a book editor by some of the best people. I'm talking about like Stephen King's editor, Michael Corder, who edited like all these amazing books on baseball, like just like all these great, wonderful, old school, in a lot of ways, editors. I've got my master's in publishing at Pace University in New York City. And that's how I landed my first internship. And then I got a job. It was really unique there in that I literally moved to New York City on Labor Day weekend of 2004 and had a job by Thanksgiving. It's like unheard of, right? The woo people would say I'm a Matches manifestor, and I think that's totally right in line with that. But yeah, so I came up there. I did everything when I worked at Simon and Schuster because you start out as an editor, as a baby editor, as an assistant, and I assisted a lot of people. So I worked on everything: fiction, nonfiction, how to, mysteries, thrillers, books I hated, books I loved, everything. And from there, I went to Penguin in 2008, which was then and is now the number 1 publisher in the world. And I worked at Penguin on what we call prescriptive nonfiction. So that's how-to books, and that's still sort of my realm. I left Penguin in 2012 to start my own business. I was a solopreneur for a long time. I would work on sort of anything that was nonfiction, hybrid published, self-published. And then in 2020, I decided to really niche down and market myself and just kind of go for everything, like a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, do. And we now specialize in teaching about publishing to entrepreneurs and experts who want a traditional book deal. That's our main audience. A lot of that, though, like people select out, or they go to hybrid, or they're better fit for hybrid or self. So I'm also I educate on the options as well. So we do a little bit of everything. We will save manuscripts when they're in trouble, when they have a book deal and they are already published. We wrote a book in 6 weeks last year for Portfolio, which is a department within Penguin Random House. We write proposals, we develop projects, and we also help authors build their author platform, which is a fancy publishing word for an audience. And we educate up and down, because I honestly think that for a lot of entrepreneurs and experts, a book is amazing for their business and for their personal brand as a thought leader, for their impact. And traditional publishing has a lot of value for a lot of entrepreneurs and experts. So I like to kind of open the doors to the clique, if you will, a clique that I've been a part of, for almost 20 years.
Yeah. What a description. What an experience. What a joy. I think it's really awesome. You mentioned something here that I want to tap into. We mentioned a lot of things. Clearly you have a wealth of knowledge around the industry. What I really want to know is you had alluded to the different types of publishing options. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to really dig into this. And it sounds like there are really core 3 that you mentioned, which is the self-publishing sphere, the hybrid publishing sphere, and the traditional publishing sphere. From your experience and your vantage point, can you walk through those 3, maybe a little bit about what each one is? Because I want people to understand there's always more than one way to go about doing it. And I think there are different people that could be best suited for each option, but it's important that first and foremost, we're educated to make the best decision. So I'd love to hear kind of your breakdown.
I completely agree with you. And this is a conversation I used to have all the time. I've had it since I started my business and probably before that as well at writers' conferences and things like that. So self-publishing is the wild, wild west. That's the way I describe it. Um, there's a million ways to self-publish because it's ungoverned. There are no gatekeepers. There are a million businesses and service providers and all sorts of ways to go about it. You can, load a Word document to KDP. You can spend $100,000 on a self-published book. It's really the wild, wild west. Hybrid publishing is really interesting. Hybrid publishing, there's a lot of reasons to self-publish also. Hybrid publishing is super interesting. I describe hybrid as a pay-to-play model. So a lot of the hybrid publishers have the same distribution as traditional publishers. Also, just so your listeners know, there's only one major book distributor in the United States. It kind of blows your mind a little bit. It's called Ingram. And so if your book is sold through Ingram, it is basically like sold the same way that like a Simon & Schuster book is sold or a Penguin Random House is sold. I'm going to talk a little bit about distribution because it's dorky, but it's important later. But in terms of that, like hybrid is pay to play. The really professional hybrids that are run by like Forbes Books or Greenleaf are some of the companies that I know of. Those can run you anywhere between 10,000 to 100,000 to produce your book as well, especially if you pay for their marketing support and things like that. Scribe Media was a big hybrid publisher up until really recently. They also did self-publishing, but they imploded recently, which I think is kind of the risk in hybrid. You never know how long those companies are going to be around. Same with self. Traditional publishing is the old behemoth. These places have been around for hundreds of years often. They started out often as family firms that have like over the decades conglomerated into major massive companies. When I worked there, Simon & Schuster had 500 employees. Penguin Random House is a combination of the number one and number two companies and publishing companies in the United States, and PRH is the biggest publishing house in the world. They are very gate kept, but they sell a lot more books by volume, I would say, arguably. Most of those authors, those publishers, I like to describe them almost like venture capitalists. So if you watch Shark Tank, you kind of have an idea of like what the publisher does in terms of like they're looking to make money and they're looking to partner with their authors on books. And so that's really what they're doing. So it's people want different deals for different reasons, right? You can want a traditional book deal just because you want one, and I think that's totally fine. Just like you can want, to stay at the Four Seasons just because you want to, and that's okay. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What I kind of get annoyed by or like fired up about is that people from marginalized identities, people of color, LGBTQIA, anybody that's like not white cis het, tends to think that traditional publishing is close to them, and that is no longer true. It kind of was at one point, but it's no longer true at all.
Yeah. This is a great breakdown of the differences. And I think it's important. Do you have like one of the things I see is that I hear of authors that are leaving traditional to come to the self-published for more control or more ownership. And I know we're going to talk down what this actually means because they want to do it on their own, or they buy their rights back, or these various different terms that people hear and speak loosely about. And then I also am seeing a lot of self-published authors or hybrid published authors. They're going to enter the world, have a successful book, and then a traditional publisher is going to scoop them up for their second and beyond. And so I would love to kind of hear your thoughts around this topic of traditional authors going to self and self getting picked up by traditional after they have proven certain amount of success.
Okay, so traditional going self, the people that do that tend to be bigger people or what we call the bid list. So let me describe for that. So bigger people makes a lot of sense, right? Once you're Stephen King, that royalty split sucks. Like, you know what I mean? Like his royalty split. Let's explain how publishing gets paid. Okay, that comes down a lot of times. It comes down to money and sales, and that's great because, may I remind you and your audience, books are a product. A lot of people forget that books are a product. They're sold, marketed, etc. So when we think about books as a product, in the self, you're basically like any entrepreneur launching a course. You're owning all of it, right? You're putting all of it out. You have all the liability, all the risk. Traditional publishing, you kind of balance the risk. And then first, the risk is more on the publisher because most books don't earn out. They don't earn the investment of the publisher. So our clients were always going for $100,000 or more. And so that math is kind of easy. Like Penguin Random
Well,
House and
real
editors.
quick. When you say
Yep.
$100,000 more, you're talking about an advance from a traditional
Yes.
publisher
Thank you for slowing me
to
down.
be able to produce the book. You're getting paid in advance. A deal is that you're getting paid in advance to write the book on a specific timeline. And
Yes.
that is what you are getting paid by the traditional
Yes.
publisher. And so that's where the $100,000 comes into play versus self. You're not getting paid to do it, but you're keeping everything, which now leads into how we break down this
Right.
100,000.
So we talk about the risk, right? Because what a publishing contract actually is, and it's different in hybrid, okay? Because that's a service agreement. So that's different. That's like a hybrid publisher is basically like hiring someone to paint your house. It's very similar. Now, with the traditional publishing, a publishing contract is actually a license. It gets complicated really fast. That's why you have a
Yep.
letter agent. But like,
Yep.
it's basically a license in perpetuity, although that's changing now because of electronic stuff. But essentially, it's a license in perpetuity. You're on a schedule because they need to know when they're putting their products out, right? You're in advance, you're given an advance. Often the advance is given to you for two reasons. It used to be so someone could hole up and write the great American novel. It is not that anymore. Okay. You are not Ernest Hemingway. Sorry, not sorry, right? So what it is, I mean, Colleen Hoover gets paid to do that, but you're not Colleen Hoover. So it's mostly, especially I'm speaking to nonfiction specifically because that's my realm of expertise. It is mostly to hire someone like me to help you write the book because you're too damn busy to write your book because you're doing whatever you did to warrant a book deal in the first place. Or they want you to invest in building your audience, right? So they put up their 100K, let's say. An editor at Penguin Random House told me they put 150K into every book. And that is not only like the cost of printing and distribution and sales and all of that, but also like keeping the lights on, the salary of that editor, right? The 30 people at that company who are going to touch your book, right? And strategize how to put it out in the market and design the cover and, when are they going to put it out? All this sort of thinking is going into that. So now Penguin Random House is in the red for $250,000, right? So if your book is 25, just to make that math work really easily for the sake of this podcast, you need to sell 10,000 copies in order for them to make money. Now, once you make 10,001 copies of sale, that's when royalty comes into play. And those splits is how you get paid, like how you get passive income from a traditional book deal. Now, that split is what self-publishing crows about, that it sucks so bad. And it does. It's not great. It's 15% on hardcover and 7.5 on trade paperbacks. So like, and that's off of list price. So that's, $250 a book, averaging that out. Not great for Stephen King, right? He's going to make a lot of money, but like for the average author who's selling 1,000 copies a year, 5,000 copies a year, it's not a lot of money. Now, where I kind of think it flips for entrepreneurs and experts and why they should, pay me my fees and go after a traditional book deal is because of the lasting imprimatur of that and the value inherent in saying you have a 6-figure book deal and having a book with Penguin Random House. Not everybody needs that. Not everybody needs the designer clothes. Not everybody needs the Ivy League education, but those markers still bring with them a lot of value. And so for my clients, I have a business coach client who took her mastermind from 25,000 to 100. I have clients that have tripled their speaking fees. The book makes them money, sure, and they love it. It's
Of course.
a dream come true, but like literally, but like really the money for them is not in the book. And I think that's a different mindset than self-publishing people who are, basically most of the time when I meet them, just trying to get work out there. They're not really thinking through the financials. They're not really thinking through how to launch and sell and market this product. They're not really thinking about the end user of the product and how they're going to experience it. Like, it's just really like, it's not as thought out. However, we can get into the picking up a book. So that does happen. It happens way more on the fiction side than the nonfiction side.
Yep.
For my authors, there's an idea in the categories I work with. So self-help, how to,
Yep. And that's
The
mostly the people that listen to this too are all in that same realm.
amazing. So for the y'all, like the first book is almost always the best book. The first book almost always sells the most. It is a rare author that is like the Fast and Furious franchise where book 7 is going to be great, right? That's not really the case. Usually the second, like it starts to dwindle. It's not, there's kind of like there's a joke at the Grammys that Best New Artist is a wash. Like most of the time they're great and sometimes they disappear off the face of the earth. That's very much true for books. We don't have very many repeat clients for that, not because they wouldn't work with us again, but because they have one book in them, they get it out there, they promote it, that's it. So a lot of times what will happen, and writers also will write themselves into a corner and put it all on the page in the first book and then have nothing, really nowhere to go in the second book, which is why sometimes you don't see a second book from authors for a really long time. If you've been thinking about something for 10 years, it's going to take you another 10 years to think about it again.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's sort of how that goes. So like, that's the big mistake. It used to be that way. There are people out there that will still say it happens that way, but I haven't really seen it operate that way since at least 2017. And that was even like for clients of mine, like Denise Duffield Thomas, who sold like 80,000 copies of her first two books, right? Like high volume. What I see more often is self-published authors who sell less than 1,000 copies who magically think a publisher is going to come and save the day on their book. And that's just not the case. The other thing that's changed is Amazon. So it used to be that we can make your history disappear. We could be like, okay, cool. You made a mistake, put out a shitty self-published book with a shitty cover and the internet will forget about it. No one's going to check the Wayback Machine on the Internet Archive. We're safe. If you go get an ISBN, if you put it, or ISBN, if you put it on Amazon, it is forever. It is going to go, because it's distributed by Ingram, it's going to go into our sales systems. And once we see a sales history that's bad, a publisher's likely to say no to 99% of the stuff they see anyway, because of the volume of what they see. So like, it's really like, we rarely work with self-published authors anymore, because I just know I don't think there's a good chance for them to get a book deal.
Yeah, no. There's some enlightening information here, Meghan. I know that I want to talk about how we sell books and how books are distributed here in a second, because I think that there's a huge misconception around that when it comes to self versus traditional. But one of the things that you alluded to, and I want to make sure I understand this correctly, is like a lot of your clients, right, in the nonfiction space, while yes, the goal is to sell as many books as possible, right? That is obviously a goal, but the bigger goal for a lot of your clients is tripling their speaking fees, quadrupling their mastermind. And a lot of it's the money that comes from having the book as the credibility tool, the authority tool, the attachment to it, the label, and then leveraging that for the opportunity to do the business back end. Is that what a lot of your clients are doing that
Kind
have
of.
digital deals as well too?
So my most successful clients, see, this is one piece to the puzzle.
Yep.
A lot of them already have that.
Yep.
They've already got, I'm working with a client right now who has 500,000 followers on Instagram. She's running $1 million business. It's her first year in business. She's an amazing person. Or like I have people that, are so busy that they can't even like meet with us once a week because they're running around speaking and facilitating everywhere. Like my most successful clients, they're not using the book as a tool to get their business right. Their business is already right. And they're using their book to like as one more piece to the puzzle.
Yep. That's great. So let's talk about this, because I think this is going to be a lot of fun, because I think a lot of people, and myself included, can always be updated on the knowledge you have related to distribution from a traditional publishing house, and talking about how do books sell, right? Because there are different worlds of thought and people, my friends who have been traditionally published, depending on what their advances were, depending on how big of a following they had, they've mentioned there's differences within the traditional world. So,
Hmm.
how do books sell? Do traditional publishers market your book? Do they distribute your book? Do they assist in the lifetime amount of sales? Do they put more money behind it? Walk us through what that looks like from a traditional side.
So it depends. Your results may vary, right? I've had books that got treated really. I'm thinking of one author in particular. She just had every possible thing wrong that could have happened went wrong, right? She lost her editor. Her agent was AOL most of the time, AWOL most of the time. Like it just wasn't, and she still sold 30,000 copies because her platform and her dedication and her commitment did it with very little help from Penguin Random House, right? I have another client where they are doing everything they possibly can to support her. They're giving her all the resources they possibly can. They spent a lot of money on that book. So when they spend more money on the book, they're going to pay more attention because there's high risk for them. Now, money to them is relative. 150 there, and a lot of in the self-help space is kind of the bottom, unless you're at the top tier publishers. You know, uh, we were joking last year that 175 is the new 100, right? It's come down a little because, like everything in the economic world right now, it's a little down. They just went through layoffs. They're being pretty conservative right now at this moment in fall of 2023. But that 100 to 250 range is kind of the bottom of the market for authors who have a following that we could reasonably expect to convert into, anywhere from 10,000 to 30,000 copies in the first year. Now, how books sell? Great question. So, a lot of times by the author and the author's friends and the author's marketing and establishing in the market. So, the most important time is that pre-order time, and I'm sure you've done it. I'm sure you've seen your entrepreneurial friends do it. I'm sure people in this audience have seen people like Rachel Rogers or Amy Porterfield or Denise Neville Thomas promote their books, and you hear nothing but the book promotion for like 2 months. That's for pre-sales. That's really important because at the traditional publishers, they sell in, which is like they all go to this conference and like sell into the major accounts. So the major accounts are Barnes and Noble, Amazon, and then they literally have regional sales forces that go out to the independent bookstores. Something that I find really interesting is that people do not make the connection between shopping small and publishing their book on Amazon. So I'll see like all these people that are really passionate. I live in Seattle, pretty liberal city where everybody's trying to bring their tote bags to the co-op and stuff. And yet there are Amazon books, and I'm like, oh, it's not, God, it doesn't go with it, right? Because self-publishing won't distribute to independent bookstores because it's too risky for independent bookstores to carry self-published books because most self-published books don't sell very many copies, right? So the book industry is really weird. The only way to get like your book in the airport bookstore is to really have it be traditionally published. There's certain things about distribution that really matter. I also think for people that work in corporations that do a lot of speaking facilitation, traditional publishing is great because one thing they're really good at is they have entire departments for it. It's like shipping a box of books to wherever, Ted in Atlanta next week or whatever. They can do that really well. Um, Foreign rights is also a thing, right? A publisher is going to try to make as most money off that deal they can. So they're going to buy your foreign rights and sell it all around the world. My books that I've worked on have sold all around the world. You want to talk about fugly covers? Let's wait for the Asian countries. It's weird. It's fun, but weird. And then what else was I going to say about rights? How books sell though? So it used to be that press would sell books. That's not really true anymore, mostly because who watches the Today Show? When's the last time you watched the Today Show, right? Or Good Morning America? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
just not that book buying audience anymore. I think social sells books, but only in that social media and book talk, certainly only in the fact that you're creating a relationship. So selling a book is just like selling any other product. It's all about the relationship. My client Kendrick Shope, she's like the queen of authentic selling. She says friends buy from friends. All else fails, friends buy from friends. And that's totally true. So like a big mistake that I see authors making is thinking that a lot of people are going to come to their book just like by like osmosis. And it's like that doesn't happen. I'm a book professional And I don't even know all the books that are coming out. I find books like a couple years after the fact and be like, oh shit, I should have read this. This was great. Or I see something on the bestseller list and I'm like, what the hell's that? Right? Let me go find out what that story is. Because there's always a story, like those magic bestsellers or something. There's always a story there. If we dig in deep enough, even if it looks like they have no platform or whatever, there's usually something that's going on there. Or in the case of like Colleen Hoover on the fiction side, it's just a really good book.
Yeah. Yeah. This is really fascinating. Let me ask you this. You mentioned a couple times around the idea of, that the 100 to 250, right? Kind of that minimum in this genre. And a lot of that's based on if the expectation of the author's following can likely move 10,000 to 30,000 copies in the first year. Yeah. Obviously, that's probably broken down. There's a formula for that, I'm sure, broken down by a percentage of followers across all social platforms.
Oh, there's no formula. It's all subjective. Did you not know that traditional publishing runs on opinion completely and no data whatsoever?
Okay. So then let me ask this. Let me ask this then, because it was really interesting. So like, how can someone, show that they could sell those amount of copies to warrant themselves, quote unquote, worthy of getting past the gatekeeper and getting a deal? Now, and this is what you do, right? Like you're excellent at doing this exact thing. So how do you curate the right story? And, a lot of people you're talking about have these followings, have the business already dialed in. So how do you do it for someone who's like always wanted to do it, or are they not the right fit for traditional publishing? Do you have like a follower count that you kind of look at, or an engagement count, email newsletters? Like what's your kind of criteria to then get to the traditional deal? Because I think this is a really important thing to discuss as we kind of head to the back end of this conversation.
100%. So we have what I call the 3 Ps. I invented them. It is potential, platform, proposal. That's how exclusively like self-help books get published. Not talking about memoir. I'm not talking about family histories. I'm not talking about fiction, children's, etc. So when we go to that, the book idea always matters. You can have the biggest platform in the history of the world, and if the book idea isn't any good, no one's going to buy it. This is why celebrity books fail, right? If it doesn't like make sense to the celebrity's audience or convert to them or matter to them, it's not going to sell. It's totally fine. So the potential really matters. The book idea super matters. So when someone comes to me and wants to work with me on, their book proposal or even their platform, because we teach author platform growth as well, I'm going to look at that. Like we're even doing an intensive here coming up in the new year that I'm even checking the book idea for that, because I don't want anyone to be like upset. I only want to help people that I can help, right? And I'm not appropriate for everybody. So once we get over that book idea hurdle, and it's even just like the nascent idea, I don't need the table of contents. I don't need, God, don't write anything. We don't need you to write the whole book for a traditional book deal. We'd rather work with like something kind of sketchy and drafty and open, right? Because when you write a manuscript, then you're kind of locked in emotionally to it. And if I start picking at it, you're going to be pretty pissed at me. So then we go into the platform piece. That's the audience piece, right? That's to some extent the sales and marketing piece. There's no magic number. I get to ask this like every day. And it sucks. I wish they were more data driven because they'd make better decisions. Honestly, I'm married to a user experience guy. Like when I explained publishing to him, it like blew his mind. Okay. I think he's still mad about it. It's like 10 years ago now. So like they make all sorts of wacky little decisions based on feeling and heart. Sometimes that goes your way, sometimes it doesn't. So that is the one thing about that though. If you're just sitting here and you're listening and not, 80% of my clients are this way, where they're like sitting there with an audience that's less than 100,000 people. They are building their business. They're growing their business. They're still experimenting. They're still finding their way. They're still figuring out marketing and their offers and all of that. There is still a path to getting published because you doing that, you figuring that out and growing your audience, you can get there, right? There's a proven way to get there. And I have actually looked at my clients because as an entrepreneur myself, I'm like, okay, cool. What do y'all do? And we'll have conversations because sometimes they just want someone to talk to, my clients, my really high-end clients, they just want to bounce ideas off of here. And so they're telling me all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, cool, well, let me find out like what you did. Or like, I'll watch people grow. So I'll meet you when you're at 25K. And then once we sell your book and something pops off and all of a sudden you're at 200K, well, what happened? What did you do? Who'd you work with? What moves were you making? How did your business grow? How did you grow as a person? What were your new boundaries? What were your new expectations? What were your goals? How did you see this all fitting in? What was your master plan? Right? All these things that can happen. And so we can reverse engineer that for people if a traditional deal is what they want and if they're willing to put in the work. Then, and that's the biggest piece. That's where I see people fall out a lot, because anybody could write a proposal. Now, I write the best in the business. Agents have told me that. I've gotten $5 million for people over the last 5 years, a pretty baller results on proposals, because I think I understand that marketing piece, right? Mm-hmm. That how do I fashion Jake so that all the objections are already answered, right? Because I've been in the rooms where those decisions are made. And so I understand the question, the conversation, and the context that a lot of other ghostwriters or freelancers just don't know. And those books about proposals don't waste your money. Not to insult anybody that's written them, but a lot of them are out of date or unique to that one person's experience. And it's hopefully something you only have to do once. I talk to my authors about that a lot. If your book is really gangbusters good for the first book, I've literally seen deals for the second book made on an email or a phone call or a text. It's the easiest thing. You just have to get in the door. So that proposal piece is really important. And then once the proposal is done, then we get a literary agent on board, because I really believe in literary agents to protect the rights of my clients, because I don't know the ins and outs of the contracts and the finances and all of that.
Yep.
And then you have your book deal and you have to write the book, and we help our clients with that too.
Love it.
But it is really possible. Everybody's path is really unique, and there's no one right way to do it. I think the right path for people comes down to what they want and what they're willing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. What a great way to kind of wrap up today. How do we follow you? How do we continue to learn more about your wisdom? How do we work with you? Give us all the goods and all the places.
Of course. So I am on Instagram at Meg Stevenson, MEGSTEVENSON. You can check me out at meghanstevenson.com. It's Megan with an H, MEGHANSTEVENSON. I was like, can I spell my own name? I do run a book deal boot camp. It is coming. It's going to be open through December. And we're going to start in January. It's everything you need to know to get a book deal in 12 weeks. It's pretty awesome. I have to say so myself. That's kind of like our entry level product, but I send out weekly emails that people find really helpful. And my whole goal is to educate people, whether you work with me, whether you work with Jake, whatever you choose to do, I want to prevent people from doing something because they want a book out in the world and then regretting how they put it out in the world. Because that sucks. I have a close friend, I'm going to call her Sharon, who I was in a mindset group with. And she was like, I'm going to publish this book. It's going to be such a big deal for me. And I was like, that's awesome. I was like, we should have a conversation about this. I'm not going to charge you. I'm not going to do whatever. We should have a conversation. And she's like, no, I got it. I was like, okay. And then she self-published it. And because she hadn't grown her audience at all, she sold 5 copies and was really upset. And when I sent out the email that attracted your attention, the 10 things I hate about self-publishing, she emailed back and she was like, yeah, all of this. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to prevent, because it's not that she couldn't have had a great book, and it's not that she couldn't have, eventually gotten there, but she was disappointed with her results. And that's what I see a lot of people doing that, where you could, get those ideas out in the world in an email. You could get those ideas out in the world in a social media post or a TikTok or a YouTube, or there's so many ways to share your content. It doesn't always have to be rushing to put it into a Word doc.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So we'll get all that linked up for you and for everybody here in the show notes. But if you enjoyed this episode, tell Megan thank you because she dropped a lot of great information that you probably haven't heard me talk too much about on the podcast, because we come from different backgrounds and different frames of thought around this space. And the coolest thing about it is, as she said, and as I've said, and I'll say it 100 times, is there's no one right way to get your book into the world. But if you have the story and you have the message and you have the drive and you have the desire, there is a way. And so I'd encourage you to think about, what is your path? Where do you want to go? Who do you want to be involved on this journey? And who do you want to bring along with you? And with that said, we're wrapping up today. Thank you, Meghan, for being here. And thank you to all of you for listening to this show and making your book dreams your reality. I'll talk to you next time.